The blood-red holographic screen flickered in the dimly lit room, displaying a bounty profile that made even the most hardened killers pause. The face of a man named John Mercer appeared, disheveled hair, sharp green eyes, and a faded scar running down his cheek. His expression seemed cold, detached, like someone who had seen too much and cared too little. Below his image, in bold crimson letters, flashed a shocking detail. Confirmed kills, 2,437. Wait! Draxon the Bone Crusher rumbled, his massive reptilian fingers tapping the screen. 2,437? That's gotta be a glitch. BYRNN snorted, adjusting his cybernetic visor to scan for errors. A human can't rack up numbers like that. They barely live long enough to learn how to hold a plasma rifle. Zalare the Shadow Warden leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Her crimson skin shimmered faintly as her alien form shifted between visible and transparent. Humans are unpredictable, she murmured. Still, this one's just a man. Soft skin, fragile bones. We've killed worse. The room fell quiet. Even these elite assassins, each with their own blood-soaked reputation, felt uneasy. The Dominion rarely issued kill contracts on humans. They weren't seen as powerful enough to warrant high-priority hits. Yet here they were, assigned to eliminate a man whose kill count rivaled that of seasoned warlords. 3 of us, Draxon grunted. 1 human. Let's get this over with. Their ship descended over Earth that night, slipping past primitive satellites and military sensors like a whisper. They landed outside a small house in the suburbs, neat lawn, mailbox leaning slightly to one side, and a porch light that flickered as if unsure whether to stay on or off. The assassins exchanged doubtful glances. This is it? VYRNN muttered. Looks like the guy spends more time mowing his lawn than dodging assassins. Maybe that's his trick, Zalare said dryly. They moved in silently, splitting up to cover exits. Draxon approached the front door, choosing brute force over subtlety. His clawed fist smashed through the wood with a deafening crack. The door caved in, and Draxon stormed through. The frying pan hit him square in the face. The force of the blows sent the hulking reptilian stumbling backward, dazed. Before he could react, John Mercer was on him, not with a gun, not with a knife, but with a roll of duct tape. In a blur, Mercer wrapped the tape around Draxon's arms, legs, and snout, securing the massive warrior to a chair with brutal efficiency. What the? Draxon tried to shout, but the duct tape muffled his words. Zalare moved in from the shadows, silent as smoke. Her blade gleamed in her hand as she lunged toward Mercer's back. At the last second, Mercer shifted his weight, sidestepped, and yanked a tripwire that had been hidden beneath the carpet. A mechanical arm shot from the ceiling, hurling a heavy toolbox directly into Zalare's face. She collapsed in a heap, groaning. Who are you? She gasped, clutching her throbbing skull. Mercer barely spared her a glance. I'm the guy who hates uninvited guests. VYRNN, still outside, watched the chaos unfold on his visor. He cursed under his breath and activated his drones. Tiny spheres shot into the air, converging on Mercer's position. As the drones entered the living room window, Mercer grabbed a nearby remote control, pressed a button, and activated a hidden signal jammer. The drones sparked violently and crashed to the floor. You've got to be kidding me, BYRNN muttered. He drew a pulse rifle from his back and charged toward the house. As soon as he stepped inside, he felt a cold barrel press against his temple. I wouldn't, Mercer warned. VYRNN froze. Mercer stood behind him, holding an old yet reliable revolver, the kind that spat lethal steel instead of energy blasts. All right, VYRNN said slowly, setting his rifle down. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Mercer chuckled darkly. Wrong foot? You people kicked down my door, tried to stab me, and sent killer drones into my living room. I'd say that's pretty one-sided. VYRNN's eyes flicked to Draxon and Zalare, both groaning and tied up like oversized presents. You're just one guy, VYRNN stammered. How? I've had practice, Mercer interrupted. A lot of practice. He motioned for VYRNN to sit with the others. The assassin complied, glancing nervously at the wall. That's when he noticed it, a collection of medals, commendations, and faded photographs. John Mercer surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. Him shaking hands with world leaders. A grainy photo of Mercer standing over a battlefield, bodies strewn around him like discarded ragdolls. You're a soldier, BYRNN muttered. Was, Mercer corrected. Now I'm just a guy trying to live in peace. Zalare groaned from the floor. Then why would the Dominion want you dead? Mercer's face darkened. He walked to his desk and activated a small holographic screen. A series of encrypted files flashed across it: Dominion war plans, illegal genetic experiments, records of entire planets being wiped out to cover corruption. I know things they don't want getting out, Mercer said quietly. Things they'd kill to bury. You're bluffing, BYRNN said. If you had proof, you'd be untouchable. Mercer smirked. I've been untouchable for years. Doesn't mean they won't keep trying. Why not just leave Earth? Zalare asked. I tried, Mercer said. But running means leaving good people behind. Friends, neighbors, family, they don't deserve to get caught in the crossfire. His voice hardened. So I stayed. And every time they send someone after me, I send them back in pieces. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Even Draxon, still wrapped in duct tape, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. You can leave now, Mercer said finally. I'll let you walk away. But if you try again, well... He gestured to the wall of photographs, a reminder of what he was capable of. I'm not the one you should be afraid of. The assassins didn't need to be told twice. One by one, they shuffled out of the house, battered, bruised, and deeply unsettled. As they reached their ship, VYRNN paused and looked back. What's wrong? Zalare asked. VYRNN shook his head. We underestimated him, he said. Next time, we won't. But deep down, VYRNN wondered if there would ever be a next time. Something told him that John Mercer wasn't the type of man you survived fighting twice. Inside the house, Mercer locked the door and sighed heavily. He leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of old memories settle over him like a suffocating blanket. The Dominion wasn't going to stop. He knew that. But neither was he. John Mercer sat in his dimly lit living room, sipping a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. His eyes lingered on the scattered papers and data drives sprawled across the table. The Dominion's corruption, their cover-ups, their war crimes, it was all there. Hard proof that they'd been exterminating entire colonies under the guise of containment. He should have released it years ago, but every time he tried, someone came for him. Assassins, mercenaries, spies, they never stopped. Tonight's attackers were just the latest reminder that his past would never let him rest. His mind drifted back to memories he tried hard to forget. The screams of his comrades, the faces of civilians caught in the crossfire, the blood that clung to his hands no matter how many times he washed them. The Blackthorn Initiative had molded him into something ruthless, a precision killer who followed orders without question. Back then, he believed he was fighting for a cause. He thought he was protecting Earth, preserving peace. But in reality, he had been a tool, one they had used until he was too dangerous to control. The last mission was what broke him. It was supposed to be a simple extraction, eliminate a rogue scientist leaking Dominion secrets. The information wasn't supposed to exist. The Dominion's cover-ups had to remain airtight. But when John found the scientist, it wasn't just one man. It was a room filled with terrified civilians, mothers, fathers, children, all deemed collateral damage. The Dominion ordered him to eliminate everyone in that room. John refused. He saved the scientist and fled, knowing full well that betraying the Dominion meant painting a target on his back for the rest of his life. He shook the memories away and returned his focus to the present. His house still smelled like burned circuits from the destroyed drones. Bloodstains marked the carpet where Draxon and Zalare had fallen. He knew they'd be back, or someone even worse would come in their place. He needed to know who had sent them. Retrieving a battered laptop, John accessed the Dominion's encrypted communication channels. It didn't take long before he found the contract, direct orders from a Dominion counselor named Lord Ralar. Ralar's name was familiar. He was powerful, ruthless, and notoriously paranoid. The fact that Ralar had singled out John meant the counselor believed John knew something dangerous enough to kill for. John scanned the contract further and found the details that made his blood run cold. The bounty wasn't just for John, it included instructions to track and eliminate anyone connected to him. Friends, contacts, even distant acquaintances. No one was safe. The thought of innocent people dying because of him twisted John's stomach. He had spent years trying to disappear, cutting ties with anyone who might get hurt. But that clearly wasn't enough. He wasn't just a target. He was a loose end the Dominion intended to tie off permanently. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Draxon, Vyrnn, and Zalari limped back into their ship. Draxon grumbled curses as he peeled layers of duct tape off his scales, each tug making him wince. Zalari sat quietly in the corner, her face still bruised from the toolbox impact. Vyrnn typed rapidly at his terminal, scanning the Dominion's bounty networks. "He's not just some guy," Vyrnn muttered, his fingers dancing across the keys. "John Mercer's got a record. Ex-Blackthorn. Fought in 5 wars. Commanded kill squads. The guy's a legend. A legend who just kicked our collective asses," Draxon growled. "How does one human do that?" "Because he's not just a human," Zalari cut in, her voice low. "He's something worse, a human with nothing left to lose." Vyrnn continued digging into the Dominion archives, bypassing layers of encryption. His eyes widened as he stumbled upon something unexpected: classified data on Dominion military experiments. Hidden files revealed a dark project Ralar had been funding for years, a secret war involving biological weapons designed to decimate planetary populations. Thousands of civilians had been slaughtered, their deaths recorded as accidents or natural disasters. "That's why Mercer's a threat," Vyrnn muttered. "He's got dirt on Ralar. Real dirt." Zalari's gaze darkened. "Then why didn't he release it?" "He's on the run," Vyrnn said. "Every time he tries, they send people like us after him." For the first time, Draxon's bravado faltered. "If we're part of this," he muttered, "we're on the wrong side." Zalari's gaze lingered on the screen a moment longer, her expression hardening. "I think we need to pay Ralar a visit." Back on Earth, John barely had time to react before his security alarms flared again. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, expecting another assault team. Instead, Draxon, Vyrnn, and Zalari stood outside, this time unarmed. "You're kidding me," John muttered under his breath. He opened the door cautiously, still holding his weapon. "You must be suicidal." "We're not here to fight," Vyrnn called out, raising his hands. "We found out why they want you dead." John didn't lower his rifle, but he let them inside. Vyrnn wasted no time laying out everything he had discovered: Ralar's experiments, the Dominion's war crimes, and the plan to silence John at all costs. Mercer's face barely changed, but something behind his eyes seemed to darken. "I already knew," John muttered. "I've been trying to stop it for years." "We want to help," Draxon said, surprising even himself with the words. "Whatever's coming. I've got a feeling it's bigger than you or us." John remained silent for a long time. The scars on his face seemed deeper now, like he was weighing every decision he'd ever made. He knew trusting them was a gamble, but he also knew what would happen if he stood alone. He had spent years running, avoiding fights unless they came to his door. But now, with innocent lives hanging in the balance, there was no choice. "We can't stop Ralar from here," John said finally. "If we're going to end this, we need to take the fight to him." Vyrnn gave a grim smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." John retrieved a dusty lockbox from a hidden compartment beneath his floor. Inside lay the tools of a man he had tried to forget: sleek black blades, compact explosives, and a custom rifle that had seen more blood than most soldiers. He picked up the weapon and felt the cold weight of it in his hands. It felt familiar, dangerous, like shaking hands with an old enemy. Draxon shifted uneasily as John prepared. "I've got to ask," he muttered. "That kill count of yours, is it really that high?" John gave a humorless smile. "I stopped counting a long time ago." He chambered around and slung the rifle over his shoulder. "But if Ralar wants a body count, I'll be happy to add his name to the list." The cold hum of the ship's engines thrummed beneath John's boots as he stared out the window into the endless void of space. The stars stretched across the horizon like distant pinpricks of hope, but John wasn't interested in hope. He was focused on one thing: ending this nightmare before it spiraled even further out of control. Draxon, Vyrnn, and Zalare were gathered around a worn-out table, going over the plan they had pieced together during their trip. The destination was clear: Ralar's command station orbiting the gas giant Nymos V, a fortress bristling with security measures and filled with elite Dominion guards. "We'll never get close unless we jam their scanners," Byrnn muttered, eyes locked on a flickering map of the station's layout. "If we don't block their sensors, we'll be vaporized before we get near the docking bay." John barely heard him. His mind kept drifting back to the faces from his past, the people he couldn't save. Friends, civilians, soldiers, all casualties of the Dominion's endless hunger for control. He wondered how many more bodies would pile up before this ended. "You listening?" Draxon's voice cut through John's thoughts, rough and irritated. "I don't know what they taught you in Blackthorn, but daydreaming won't save your skin out here." "I'm listening," John said quietly, still staring at the station map. "What's their weakest entry point?" Vyrnn tapped a section near the lower docking bay. "Service tunnels. They're used for maintenance crews, not heavily guarded. If we time it right, we can bypass most of the patrols." John studied the plan for a long moment before speaking. "It won't be that easy. Ralar's expecting me, and if he's smart, which he is, he'll have backup plans in place." Zalare leaned closer, her crimson gaze narrowing. "You think there's a trap?" "There's always a trap," John muttered. Hours later, their ship glided silently through the shadow of Nymos V, its engines throttled low to avoid detection. The station loomed above them like a floating fortress, angular walls lined with glowing red lights, heavy cannons bristling along its outer hull. Vyrnn worked furiously at the controls, feeding false signals into the station's detection grid. "Almost there," Vyrnn muttered. "One more second." A sudden alarm flared on the console, and Vyrnn's fingers froze. "They know we're here." "Not for long," John growled. He grabbed his rifle and sprinted to the airlock. The docking bay doors hissed open, and John leapt out with Draxon close behind. Blaster fire rained down from above as Dominion guards opened fire from the catwalks. John moved like a shadow, weaving between cover and firing clean, precise shots that dropped guards with brutal efficiency. Draxon, less precise but far more intimidating, charged through the hail of energy blasts like a wrecking ball, smashing enemies aside with his armored bulk. Zalare flickered into view, her form shifting as she danced between guards with deadly precision. Her curved blade lashed out in a blur of crimson steel, dropping enemies before they even realized she was there. Meanwhile, Vyrnn worked feverishly at a security console, bypassing locks and rerouting power to disable alarms. "We've got 5 minutes before the station goes on full lockdown," Vyrnn warned. "After that, we're stuck. Then we move fast," John said. They pushed forward through the dimly lit corridors, navigating the maze of bulkheads and storage rooms that twisted through the station. Dominion guards swarmed like angry hornets, but John's team cut through them with brutal precision. John's movements were cold and automatic, every shot clean, every step calculated. He knew this rhythm too well. It was the rhythm of war, and for all the years he had tried to leave it behind, it still fit him like a second skin. They reached Ralar's command chamber just as the station's emergency lights bathed the halls in crimson. The reinforced doors sealed shut behind them, and John knew there was no turning back. The room was large and cold, lined with towering data consoles and security monitors. At the center, Lord Ralar stood in his ornate armor, his face twisted in a smug grin. His cybernetic arm glistened with reinforced steel plating, and his glowing red eye tracked John like a predator stalking its prey. "I wondered when you'd come," Ralar sneered. "You've been quite a nuisance." John raised his rifle. "You sent killers to my home. Now I'm here to finish this." Ralar chuckled darkly. "Do you really think you're in control here?" He tapped a control panel on his arm, and hidden turrets unfolded from the walls, locking onto John's team. Guards poured into the room, surrounding them. "Drop your weapons," Ralar ordered. "Or die like the fool you are." John's fingers twitched on his rifle. Draxon's muscles tensed, ready to lunge. Zalare's hand crept toward her blade. Vyrnn, standing just behind John, gave a quick glance toward one of the consoles. "Stall him," Vyrnn whispered. John took a slow step forward, lowering his weapon slightly. "You think you're safe?" he asked, voice low and calm. "You think a few turrets and soldiers are enough to stop me?" Ralar sneered. "I've heard the stories, Mercer. You're just a man with a rifle." John's smile was grim. "You should have brought an army." In a blur, Vyrnn activated a surge in the station's power grid. The lights flickered and sparks erupted from the consoles. The security turrets jerked and twitched, their targeting systems overloaded. John seized the moment, swinging his rifle upward and firing a shot that slammed into one of the turrets, sending it crashing to the floor. Draxon roared and charged into the guards like a battering ram, while Zalare's blade danced in swift arcs of blood and steel. Ralar's mechanical arm hissed as a hidden blade extended from his wrist. He lunged at John with surprising speed, slicing the air just inches from John's throat. John ducked and drove his elbow into Ralar's ribs, sending the counselor staggering back. Ralar snarled and lashed out again, but John sidestepped and fired a point-blank shot into the counselor's mechanical arm. Sparks erupted from the damaged limb, and Ralar stumbled back, clutching the smoldering wires. "You think this ends here?" Ralar spat. "You're too late. Earth is already doomed." John froze. "What are you talking about?" Ralar's smile widened. "You think I wasted time sending mercenaries just to kill you? That was just a distraction. While you've been playing soldier, Dominion fleets have been mobilizing. Earth's already in their sights." Before John could react, Ralar activated a hidden failsafe, a countdown timer flashing on the station's monitors. A massive orbital strike had been programmed to hit Earth's major cities in less than 20 minutes. "You can kill me," Ralar snarled. "But you'll never stop what's coming." John stared at the countdown, heart pounding. His mind raced. He had spent years running, years trying to survive. Now, he realized survival wasn't enough. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for the lives of billions. Without hesitation, John grabbed Ralar by the throat and slammed him against the console. "Tell me how to stop it," John growled. Ralar only laughed. "You can't." John's fist struck the counselor's face, knocking him unconscious. He turned to Vyrnn. "Can you disable the strike?" Vyrnn's fingers flew across the controls, face pale with panic. "I can try, but we've only got minutes." The countdown timer glared from the screen, its relentless digits ticking down toward disaster. 18 minutes. That was all the time John Mercer had to stop the orbital strike that would rain fire across Earth's surface. His mind churned through every possible solution, but none seemed fast enough. Vyrnn's fingers danced over the console, desperately trying to bypass Dominion encryption, sweat pouring down his face as the system fought back against every hack. "I can't break the firewalls fast enough," Vyrnn gritted through his teeth. "They've got layers of defensive protocols. Every override I try just triggers another security lock." John clenched his fists. He knew the Dominion systems well, designed to resist sabotage, fortified against even the most skilled engineers. There was no simple trick or exploit to undo what Ralar had set in motion. This wasn't a system flaw. It was deliberate, engineered to ensure Earth's destruction. "Can't we destroy the relay?" Draxon rumbled. His bulk still bore scorch marks from the fight, but the warrior was ready to charge through a wall if it meant buying Earth a few more seconds. "Won't work," John muttered. "The strike signal is coming from multiple satellites orbiting Neimo's V. Even if we destroy one relay, the others will continue the launch. We need to shut them all down at once." VYRNN's expression darkened. "That's impossible unless we overload the station's core." John froze, eyes narrowing. Overloading the core would send a surge of energy through the station's network, frying everything connected to it, including the relay's satellites. It would stop the countdown, but the explosion would destroy the station itself. No way off. No chance of survival. "You're out of your mind," Draxon growled. "That's suicide." John stared at the countdown. 15 minutes remaining. He weighed the impossible decision: billions of lives on Earth, or the lives of himself and the crew that had fought beside him. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "We're doing it," John said. "Get everyone moving." VYRNN's fingers raced over the console again, this time rerouting power from critical systems toward the reactor core. The station's lights flickered and dimmed as power surged toward the engine room. The countdown continued to race forward, now showing 12 minutes. "Once I overload the core, we'll have 3 minutes before this place blows sky high," VYRNN warned. "We'll need to reach the escape pods before then." "There's no time for that," John said grimly. "We'll never make it." Draxon scowled. "Then what's the plan?" John drew in a slow breath. "I'm staying. Someone has to be here to detonate the core manually." For a moment there was silence, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that told John no one was going to accept that easily. Draxon shook his head and slammed his fist on the console hard enough to crack the metal. "Not happening," Draxon growled. "We didn't come this far to let you play hero." "You don't have a choice," John shot back. "I know these systems better than anyone. If the timing's even a second off, Earth is gone." "I'll stay," Zalare said suddenly. Her crimson skin seemed darker in the dim, emergency lights. "I can set the charge and cloak myself before the explosion. I might survive." John shook his head. "You know that's not true." "I can try," she said quietly. "Better than you dying alone." "You've done enough," John said softer now. "I started this. I'll finish it." VYRNN's console beeped, and a low rumble vibrated through the station's walls. The core's containment fields were weakening, power lines sparking, machinery groaning under the overload. The station's automated voice blared over the speakers in cold, monotone warnings. "Warning! Reactor core instability detected. Evacuate immediately. Detonation imminent. Go," John said firmly. "All of you." Draxon lingered for a second longer, his massive hand clenching and unclenching like he wanted to knock John unconscious and drag him away. But deep down, Draxon knew the truth. There wasn't time to argue. With a grim nod, he turned and followed VYRNN and Zalare toward the docking bay. John watched them go, their footsteps fading down the corridor. He allowed himself a moment, just one moment, to feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. The faces of old friends who had died in battle. The lives he couldn't save. The blood on his hands that never seemed to wash away. His entire life had been a cycle of violence and survival, but for once, this wasn't about killing. This was about saving. He moved to the core room, the heat from the reactor already radiating against his skin. Sparks burst from the conduits above him, and thick plumes of smoke coiled from melted wires. The core pulsed wildly, its containment field flickering. Sweat trickled down John's face as he set the manual controls, rerouting what little power remained into a controlled detonation sequence. The countdown display was brutal, 5 minutes remaining. "Almost there," John muttered under his breath. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor. John turned sharply, raising his rifle, only to find Ralar staggering toward him. Blood streaked the Dominion counselor's face, and his mechanical arms sparked violently from exposed wires. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Ralar hissed. He raised a sleek energy blade from his damaged arm, its blue glow crackling with unstable power. John had no time for this. He fired, but Ralar twisted aside, the shot sparking off a nearby wall. The counselor lunged forward, blade sweeping at John's ribs. John barely sidestepped in time, the blade singing past his chest and leaving a scorched tear in his shirt. The heat seared his skin, but John ignored the pain and drove his elbow into Ralar's face. The counselor staggered back but refused to fall. "You're out of time," Ralar sneered, blood dripping from his mouth. "Even if you kill me, Earth will burn." John didn't answer. He lunged forward, grabbing a length of exposed wiring from the wall and slamming it into Ralar's damaged arm. Electricity surged through the cybernetic limb, and Ralar convulsed violently before collapsing to the floor. His lifeless body slumped against the console, smoke rising from his scorched implants. John stumbled back to the controls, gasping for air. The countdown flashed, 1 minute remaining. He reached for the final override switch when a voice crackled through his earpiece. "John!" It was VYRNN's voice. "The ship's still here. The docking clamps never disengaged. You've got a way out." John's heart pounded. He stared at the override switch, torn between ensuring the core detonated properly and the faint, fragile hope that he might still escape. He pressed the final sequence and bolted from the room. The station groaned as explosions rippled through the halls. Metal screamed and fire bloomed across the walls. The air filled with choking smoke, and John's vision blurred as he stumbled toward the docking bay. He was almost there, barely meters away, when the floor buckled beneath him. He felt himself falling, debris crashing down in fiery wreckage. Hands grabbed his arm, hauling him upward. The stars stretched endlessly outside the ship's window, a cold and distant reminder that no matter how far they had come, there was still no true safety. The remnants of the destroyed Dominion station still flickered like distant embers, a floating graveyard of twisted metal and shattered circuits. John sat silently in the ship's cabin, his hands resting heavily on his knees. His body ached from bruises and burns, and the faint scent of smoke still clung to his clothes. He had survived, but survival didn't bring the comfort he expected. His thoughts kept circling back to Earth, to the people who had no idea how close they had come to total destruction. Draxon entered the room, his massive frame barely fitting through the narrow doorway. The big reptilian warrior leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His face still bore the swollen marks from the earlier fight, but his usual scowl was softer now. "You look like hell," Draxon muttered. "Feels worse," John said without lifting his head. "Could have fooled me," Draxon grunted. "Didn't think anyone could pull off what you just did back there." John exhaled slowly. "Didn't really have a choice." "You always have a choice," Draxon said firmly. "You could have run. Hell, you could have left Earth behind and disappeared for good. But you stayed." John shook his head. "Running doesn't fix anything. Every time I've run, someone else ends up paying the price." Draxon studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You've got a funny habit of surviving things you shouldn't." John gave a tired smile. "Yeah, seems like a curse some days." The door hissed open, and VYRNN entered, carrying a data tablet. His face was unusually grim, and John knew immediately that something was wrong. "We've got a problem," VYRNN said, his fingers tightening around the tablet. "I've been monitoring Dominion transmissions since we left. The station's destruction hit them hard, but they're regrouping." John's gaze sharpened. "What do you mean?" "Ralar's death didn't stop them," VYRNN continued. "In fact, it's made things worse. His successor, some war-hardened admiral named Cordeth, took over almost immediately. He's already consolidating power and blaming you for everything. Word is he's putting together an invasion force. Earth's still in their crosshairs." John closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall. He had barely caught his breath, and now the threat was starting all over again. He knew the Dominion wasn't the kind to cut their losses. They were too powerful, too proud to let one man humiliate them. He expected retaliation, but he hadn't expected it so soon. How long before they move? John asked. Could be weeks, could be days, Byrne said grimly. But they're coming. John's mind turned to Earth, the people walking their streets, unaware that an alien fleet was preparing to level their world. The planet had no chance against the Dominion invasion force, and even if John's warning reached Earth's leaders, it wouldn't be enough. The Dominion's technology was generations ahead of human defenses. Earth's armies wouldn't stand a chance. Then we don't let them make it to Earth, John said quietly. Zalare appeared in the doorway, her expression cold and calculating. You can't stop a fleet, Mercer, she said. You're good, but you're not that good. I know, John said. But I know how to slow them down. Zalare's crimson eyes narrowed. You've got something in mind. There's a Dominion fuel depot in the Dashin Belt, John explained. It's a supply hub. All their warships use it to refuel before hitting long-range targets. If we destroy it, we cripple their fleet before they ever get near Earth. Draxon's brow furrowed. You're talking about blowing up a military outpost, one that's guarded by enough firepower to shred a planet. Got a better idea? John asked. Draxon grunted but said nothing. The journey to the Dashin Belt was tense and silent. Each member of the crew knew what they were walking into, a high-security Dominion station armed to the teeth. Even John couldn't ignore the odds this time. There would be no clever tricks, no clean escape plan. This mission was a gamble, a desperate move to delay Earth's doom. If they failed, there wouldn't be anyone left to stop the Dominion's warships. When the station finally appeared on their scanners, its imposing silhouette filled the viewport. Rows of Dominion destroyers hovered nearby, their sleek hulls reflecting the dull glow of the station's flickering beacon lights. The fuel depot itself was massive, a cluster of towering fuel silos connected by reinforced walkways. The entire structure was surrounded by defense drones and automated turrets. John studied the layout, his mind calculating routes and risks. The core fuel tanks were in the station's center, buried beneath layers of armored plating. Blowing it required more than just firepower. They needed to place charges in precise locations to create a chain reaction strong enough to ignite the entire depot. We split up, John said. Zalare, you handle the drone control center. Draxon, you're on guard duty. Anyone tries to stop us, you break them in half. Byrne, you'll rig the core detonator. I'll plant the charges. No one argued. They knew what had to be done. The team moved swiftly once they landed. Zalare disappeared into the shadows, her shifting form slipping past security patrols. Draxon waited at the entrance, knuckles cracking as he prepared for a fight. Byrne and John made their way to the core, moving carefully through maintenance tunnels that twisted beneath the station. The core chamber was a labyrinth of pipes and pressure valves. The air stank of fuel, sharp and heavy. John crouched low, placing the first detonator near one of the main tanks. Byrne worked fast, splicing wires and connecting the remote detonator. Suddenly, a voice barked from above. Stop right there! Dominion guards swarmed the chamber, weapons raised. John barely managed to dive behind a console as energy blasts scorched the walls. Byrne ducked low, shielding the detonator behind his body. We don't have time for this, Byrne hissed. John fired back, clipping one of the guards in the shoulder. Draxon's roar echoed from the corridor, followed by the unmistakable sound of bodies crashing against walls. The big warrior barreled into the room moments later, slamming a Dominion guard into the floor hard enough to crack the metal beneath him. We're done here, Draxon growled. Get moving! John activated the detonator's timer. 2 minutes, he warned. The team sprinted back toward the ship, Dominion guards hot on their heels. Explosions rang out across the station as Zalare's sabotage sent drones spinning out of control, firing randomly into the air. The air filled with smoke and fire as the station's system spiraled into chaos. They reached the ship just as the station's core ignited. A massive shockwave erupted, engulfing the station in a towering fireball. The Dominion destroyers nearby lurched off course as the shockwave buffeted them, their hulls pockmarked with debris. The crew watched the destruction from their viewport, silent and breathless. The depot was gone, and with it, the Dominion's fastest route to Earth. The invasion was delayed, maybe even stopped entirely. For now, Earth was safe.